Recently, I was reading Smokin' Parade, a series taking place in a future where medical technology has become so advanced that any human organ can be replaced. It follows a strange teenage boy who is granted new power after witnessing unspeakable horror and tragedy. A seemingly well-intentioned corporation hiding a dark secret, and a once loving brother and sister turned bitter enemies. I lay there, reading this latest Jinsei Kataoka and Kazuma Kondo collaboration, and couldn't help but be reminded of their earlier work. There was always this voice in the back of my head that grew louder with each passing chapter. 22 chapters in, and it finally got the best of me. I wish I was reading Deadman Wonderland. Deadman Wonderland was a manga that began publishing in 2007 and ended in 2013. It deals with themes of trauma, the resolution of grief, and the horror of watching someone you love become something you no longer recognize. A short-lived anime adaptation by Manclobe aired in 2011 and covered the first 21 chapters, the hilarious English dub of which was one of the first shows to be aired on the newly revived Toonami in 2012. It was one of the first animes I watched during my edgy teen years, and I bet absolutely none of you are surprised. Despite being a little messy, it's a series that means a lot to me for several reasons, most of which I'll save until the end of this retrospective. I'll be covering those 21 adapted chapters in this video before finishing off the series in part 2. Now let's go. Deadman Wonderland has a pretty standard opening sequence, or so it seems. There's a bit of prologue in the manga, but for the purposes of this video I'm just gonna ignore it. We're immediately introduced to our protagonist, Ganta, who is disappointed with his middle school's choice of field trip. He would rather go overseas than go on some lame prison tour. He looks over to this girl and he says, "Deadman Wonderland? More like Deadman Wonder Bland, am I right, Mimi?" Little does he know. Even during this opening scene, Ganta is kind of a weird little bitch. He draws this log thing on all of his belongings. He wants to plow this girl, but he has his lunch stolen by his more attractive mate. It's actually kind of adorable how much of a dork he is. Apart from some allusions to the destruction of Tokyo during an earthquake 10 years ago, this opening is pretty standard. Then this red guy appears. As the only survivor and witness, and after some bullshit in court, Ganta is sent to Deadman Wonderland as a death row inmate, where prisoners have to perform in shows to fund the restoration of Tokyo. Seems like an awful place. They were gonna bring children here. The first arc of the series takes place in Genpop, and we get a feel for how Deadman Wonderland works. The outside of the facility resembles a birdcage surrounded by theme park attractions, the first hint at its true nature. The promoter especially is a bit of a weirdo, but I'll talk about him later. For now, just know he's a tricky dicky. After watching a fellow prisoner get sliced open, Ganta sits in his room and wishes for death. This girl breaks into his cell and is happy to save him the effort. Ganta freaks out over the sudden attack and the girl calls him out on his lies. This is Shiro, and she's a bit of a weird one. We can tell from this first appearance that she's pretty tough, and maybe a little slow, to put it lightly. She uses the vents and sewers to get around, almost like she's not meant to be seen. Even before we find out more about her, it's obvious she's been here for a long time. She also seems to already know Ganta, calling him her best friend, even though he has no memory of her. During their second meeting, first in the anime, some fellow prisoners scold Ganta for not doing his chores like the shit child he is. They recognize him as the kid that supposedly murdered his whole class, so they scold him more. Shiro beats the shit out of them, but she gets knocked out. As this is happening, Tamaki has planted some bombs on the tower to crush them under this giant bowl, just to see what happens. Don't worry about it. As he's about to be squished, Ganta finally changes his mind on the whole dying thing. It turns out the red man has given him a gift. Before making his escape, he planted this red diamond into his chest, infecting him with the nameless worm and giving him access to Branch of Sin, the ability to use blood as a weapon. He thinks about his friends, gaming, McDonald's. Yes, really, one of the things that motivates him is McDonald's. But only one thing tastes better than McDonald's, and that's revenge. He's gonna get that red piece of shit, but he can't do it as a human crepe. Bloodied, beaten, and with newfound will to live, Ganta's Branch of Sin awakens.
I wanna live! I wanna live!
Even if he doesn't realize what's just happened, for the first time since the Red Man, he's happy to be alive. Shiro, who wasn't paying attention, just thinking about food, I guess. Even Tamaki is happy, as Ganta seems to have passed his test. I'll talk about Tamaki later, but for now just know that Ganta's connection to the Red Man makes him very valuable in his eyes. I love this first chapter. It has a satisfying arc of its own while setting us up for the rest of the series. A wrongly imprisoned Ganta is out to clear his name and avenge the death of his friends. It only gets crazier from here. Another one of Ganta's companions he meets during this leg of the series is Yoh. He first appears as a normal dude, but he's manipulating everyone around him to get rich. Ganta watches him get cut open when he arrives in prison. It probably wasn't his plan, but it helps him get sympathy. He befriends Ganta only to use him as his puppet. This plan soon backfires as things start getting weird. A character like Yoh is incredibly easy to hate, but his sliminess is balanced out by his constant suffering. He also has a sister. Another inmate worth bringing up is Azami. Though omitted from the anime, Ganta meets her in the prison cafeteria. Azami takes pity on Ganta and explains the caste point system. Turns out you can get pretty much anything you want in Wonderland if you're rich enough. You can even buy off your own sentence. Otherwise you just get the bare minimum don't die shit. Azami will become more important in part 2, but for now she's the loner type, jaded by years of isolation and neglect. She quickly loses respect for Ganta when he flakes in front of Kozuji. She dismisses him as just another coward before earning it back in the dog race. In the anime, Yoh fills in for Azami's scenes and suffers in her place. The main set piece of this arc is the dog race. Death row inmates in Wonderland are poisoned constantly by their collars, kept alive by antidotes in the form of candy. Ganta mysteriously lost his candy not long after he entered Wonderland, somehow. The only way he can replace it is to beat the obstacle course and win the 100 grand CP prize. To do that, he needs to beat this fucker. Kozuji is an MMA champion turned prisoner. He can be considered the central antagonist of this portion of the series, exposing Ganta for the powerless child he is. Ruling Genpop with an iron fist, no one questions Kozuji lest he fuck them in half.
I'm gonna fuck you in half.
Ganta initially bends to him too in the beginning, until he gets sick of his shit and tells him to eat crap. Spoilers, Azami is into it. The race begins and I say again, they were going to bring children here.
Holy shit!
All of the obstacles are designed to kill, and Tamaki has set them to maximum difficulty, just for our boy here. By some miracle, Ganta and Shiro survive and make it to the final round against Kozuji. The last contestant to hold the ball wins. Watch out for the falling tiles. In the manga, some of his goons make it to the end too, but they're pretty useless. I like this panel of Kozuji kicking them all into the pit of spikes. Despite this, I feel like the anime treats Ganta's character here a little better. Here, he's suddenly very okay with the people dying around him. I guess he's just used to it now. That was quick. Ganta figures out the pattern of the falling tiles before Kozuji and uses this to his advantage. Kozuji falls into the pit of spikes. Yes! In the anime he dies, in the manga he lives somehow. On his way down, Kozuji chucks his knife at Ganta, but it's blocked by Shiro. And it's here he finally gets a good look at her. She's pretty beat up, almost like she was trying to protect him the whole time. Aww. Shiro, about to fall into the spike pit, throws the ball to Ganta so he can take the win. But he saves her instead. Adorable. Nobody wins, and Ganta doesn't get the prize. It looks like he's doomed to complete his sentence and die in prison. Until Yoh brings him his stolen candy. Turns out someone wants him alive, even though he set the obstacles to maximum difficulty. Maybe he was expecting him to use his branch of sin again, I don't know. We'll get to Tamaki in a bit, but for now I consider this the end of Genpop. Is it weird to say I would have liked to see a bit more? The time between Ganta watching all his friends die to the end of the dog race is 3 chapters. I feel like we could have maybe had one more before we got into the really weird shit, you know? Here's an idea that came to me as I was editing. What if Ganta met a real mass murderer? One that was actually guilty of the crime Ganta was sent here for. I say that, but it probably would have went similarly to Kozuji and the dog race. I'm not a freaking murderer, etc. This becomes a bit of a recurring thing with Deadman Wonderland, in that it doesn't stay in one place very long. In some ways this fast pacing works to its advantage, but I can't help but feel like we may have missed some opportunities along the way. Oh well, we gotta get back to the Red Man. Ganta, Shiro, the Red Man, and no one all know a song about a poison woodpecker. Both the manga and anime have different lyrics, and I won't embarrass myself by singing it, but the lullaby describes a woodpecker pecking holes in the trees. This pecking angers the forest god, who poisons its beak. This in turn poisons its nest, its food, and its friends, who all die before it. In the end, the woodpecker is left alone in its misery. The song can be interpreted to represent a few characters, but its true meaning won't be revealed until later in the series. In the anime, it signals the appearance of the Wretched Egg, who I've been calling the Red Man. I'm gonna switch between the two a lot, but the Red Man is Ganta's name for the Wretched Egg. After the dog race is over, it's revealed that Yoh is being bribed by the promoter to keep an eye on Ganta. Things are going pretty well at first, but it looks like someone has escaped containment. Uh-oh. The Red Man makes a beeline for Ganta, who panics thinking he's about to lose someone else. Ganta's branch of sin awakens again, and the Red Man is impressed. I love the way Wretched Egg is drawn here. This deranged smile after he's hit by Ganta will forever make me lose bladder control. Ganta doesn't fully understand his powers yet, so the first few times he uses it, it's almost involuntary. He doesn't even know that it's coming from his blood yet. Yoh shits in his jumpsuit as the Red Man says goodbye. Before he leaves, he calls Ganta Woodpecker. I've already gone over the significance of woodpeckers in the series, but in general, woodpeckers are often used to represent perseverance and the realization of potential. I'm gonna have to cherry pick with some of the bird symbolism, since a lot of what I'm reading is all over the place. Kinda like how the color red has been used to symbolize both love and violence. Hey, wait a minute. Yoh is about to quit right then and there, but Tamaki tells him, "Hey, shut up, bitch. Here, take some more CP, you filthy whore." And that was all the convincing he needed. Ganta wakes up in a hospital bed ready to find that red piece of shit, and he overhears these prisoners talking about the encounter. Apparently there was a similar incident 4 years ago. A man with similar powers was locked away in G Ward, which doesn't exist, but it does exist. How does this guy know? The way the series handles Genpop's perception of G Ward is a little weird. I guess G Ward is a bit of an urban legend. In the same vein as KFC having all these labs under their restaurants with 6-legged chickens with no heads. Yoh says it doesn't exist, but this guy seems pretty certain. This skepticism is shot down by Shiro, who knows where it is. Unfortunately, the chief warden is a little suspicious of Ganta. Seems like wherever he goes, shit blows up. Ganta and friends run off to find G Ward as they're chased by this security robot, Necro Macro. Yoh temporarily disables it with his sticky fingers, ew, and with the help of a very grumpy Shiro, they make it to the fabled G Ward. Unfortunately, Yoh's fingers could have been stickier. Ganta laments that he's about to lose everything a second time. He lost all of his friends to the Red Man, and now he's going to lose his new friends too trying to find him. Then Shiro fucking loses it. This scene appears to be a clumsy attempt at conflict with psycho-crazy Shiro being Shiro, but I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that this is the first clue at what's really going on with her. Shiro chastises Ganta for his wording of all of his friends, when Shiro is his friend too, but she's still alive. This is the first layer coming off. You could say we're peeling off the shell. Also, I don't know if they were rushing to finish the chapter or something, but Yoh, Shiro and Ganta all switch places a lot here. It's really weird and distracting when you notice it. Maybe they were all just running in circles around each other in a panic. Just a fun little goof. Ganta apologizes for doing nothing wrong as all seems lost. Until... fucking hell. Why didn't anyone use this as an opportunity to escape? Surely he could have done this much for Nagi later on. A man emerges from the wreckage. Ganta doesn't recognize him, but he seems to recognize Ganta. He smiles and says, "Hello, Woodpecker." It's not him. It's not the Red Man. Ganta, certain that this is the guy, attacks but is quickly humiliated. His name is Senji, and he's another branch of Sin user like Ganta. Turns out G Ward is full of them. This is also the first time Ganta uses his branch of Sin intentionally. When the projectile cracks Senji's sternum, he's quite impressed. But it turns out he's not the Red Man we're looking for. Senji lives to fight. His open coat is constantly showing off his abs, reminding everyone around him he's hot shit. Everything about his design screams meathead. He's great. Side note, but I seriously thought the tattoo on his eyebrow said ASMR. Ugh. Senji's branch manifests itself as bladed weapons, usually from his arms. He's dangerous up close, but weak against women. I guess that's one way to disarm tension. Senji still wants to fight, but Mortal Kombat is cut short when everyone gets tranked by guards. Ganta wakes up, not in his cell, but in a lab, and he's met by the prison's dickhead promoter. It's here we find out the true purpose of Wonderland.
Who's that Pokemon? It's
The Wretched Egg.
Tamaki is the promoter of Deadman Wonderland. He can be considered the main villain of the first half of the series, alongside Wretched Egg. Running the facility in the director's absence, he views the prison and its attractions as his art, and the inmates as his playthings. This attitude is reinforced visually by his office being decorated with toys and the prison's colourful mascot characters. Birds seem to be a recurring theme. It turns out what we've seen so far is a front. The true Deadman Wonderland was built not to contain criminals, but branch of Sin users like Ganta, also known as Deadmen. Get it? In the beginning of the series, Tamaki represented Ganta in court. Though most of the trial happened off-panel, his weak defense made sure he was convicted. The anime takes this a step further, using doctored footage of a fake confession. And now he has him right where he wants him in G Ward. Tamaki has taken a liking to Ganta. As a surviving witness of the Wretched Egg, who the prison was built to contain, he's extremely valuable. But at the same time, he won't go out of his way to protect him. If he breaks, he'll just find a new toy. Besides, dead men are valuable resources, living or dead, and now it's time to see how he stacks up compared to the rest of his toys and Carnival Corpse. Carnival Corpse is the main attraction of G Ward. Open only to a select few spectators, dead men are conscripted to fight 1v1 in gladiatorial combat until one is either dead or incapacitated. The winner fights another day, the loser donates an organ. Tamaki tells Ganta that if he keeps winning, he'll eventually get his fight with the Wretched Egg, but first he has unfinished business with Senji. The dead men and their branches of sin are all named after birds, with Senji being the crow. Crows in Japan represent rebirth, As a firm believer in survival of the fittest, Senji vastly prefers Deadman Wonderland over the outside world. Also worth noting is Yadagarasu. Sorry if I pronounced the name wrong. Yadagarasu is a three-legged crow in Japanese mythology who is seen as a symbol of guidance, fitting considering the role Senji will eventually fill. Tamaki seems to have planned for Ganta to end up in G Ward as Crow recognizes him from the fight card when they met outside. I'm not sure what Tamaki's plan was to get Ganta into G Ward. He can't have used the Wretched Egg as bait because the containment breach wasn't his doing. The whole thing feels a little contrived. Maybe he did have a plan but it got put on hold by the breach. Maybe Ganta wasn't meant to end up in G Ward yet, but he rushed to get him a match when he saw he was on his way. But how did he know this guy would bring up Senji? Was he a plant? I'm just gonna assume he got lucky. Whatever the case, now a kid has to fight a grown-ass man with knives in his arms. Watch out for the biceps on his... The fight begins and Ganta gets to high ground and begins shooting his bloody bullets at Senji, who blocks them effortlessly. Ganta repeats this idiotic tactic until he starts feeling a little sick. Turns out shooting blood everywhere has consequences, and Ganta succumbs to anemia. While not an issue for melee-based branch of Sin like Senji's, Ganta's projectile-based attacks make him extremely vulnerable if he doesn't make his shots count. Senji knocks him out of his tree, and is about to leave thinking he's won, but it turns out Ganta has one more trick up his sleeve. With presumably the last of his blood, Ganta shoots down the speaker suspended above the arena. This distracts Senji long enough for Ganta to shoot him point blank in the chest, taking the win.
Good job. You hit me dead center. And kids, got a pair.
While I'm showing off clips, when he shoots down the speaker, it screams as it falls. Did Ganta and Senji just murder a non-participant? Despite losing the fight, Senji admires Ganta's quick thinking. The two share a fist bump of respect and say goodbye. After the fight, Ganta is chilling in his cell when a bunch of other dead men barge in to introduce themselves. If you've only seen the anime, you're probably a little confused, as this scene was heavily cut. This is one of the reasons why the manga crowd want a reboot. Personally, I don't think they have to go that far, but it's nice to see a few more faces in G Ward. The anime feels a little barren by comparison. Most of them aren't that important, but it's worth pointing out Chaplin. She seems to be a bit of a fan favourite. She also seems to be the one that got everyone together for this. Also there's Minatsuki. We'll get to her. Just as Ganta is starting to get comfortable with his strange new roommates, he's reminded of the consequences of losing Carnival Corpse, and is suddenly turned off his food. As I imagine you are probably now. Sorry about that. Here's a few seconds of a squeaking frog to balance that out. Alright, back to the nasty stuff. I love the way this shows us how out of place Ganta feels in this moment. I haven't talked about his design yet because it's very plain, probably intentionally so for this reason. The dead men look so wild and outlandish compared to the small and insignificant Ganta. The only one phased by too bad for the loser, as the other dead men had got used to it a long time ago. As all this is going on, Yoh and Shiro are trying to get back into G Ward, as they were taken back to Genpop. The guards even took some of Yoh's CP. Turns out he saved a lot of the stuff. This hacker man, who says he can turn Coca-Cola into alcohol, fucking of course Yoh would know someone like this, found his sister underground, so he wants to get back in. Azami is out there too. Nice to see her again. Yoh uses Shiro to create a disturbance as he impersonates the security guard over radio. He tells the staff to shut down the power. They oblige and Yoh throws Shiro under the bus. Yoh is a dick. After the power goes out, Shiro starts acting a little weird. When more guards arrive to take her out, she says her lullaby has stopped. Ah shit. Yoh is about to make his escape when suddenly the guard tower explodes. He looks up again to see Shiro surrounded by fire and debris as Viscera rains down around her. We may have seen something similar in Chapter 1. Yeah, if the scene outside G Ward was the shell, then this would be the whites. You can probably see where this analogy is going. Before the chapter ends, we see this old man crying. This is exactly how it looks when my sisters find out I'm reading stupid fucking Deadman Wonderland for the 15th time this year. So yeah, these first few arcs are pretty good. We now have a feel for how things work in Wonderland, as well as our first real clues on what's going on beneath the surface. Unfortunately, this is where we start having some problems. Yeah, if you thought I was being nasty earlier, then things are about to get worse. And so is he. The next day, Ganta is still processing all of this bullshit when he hears Minatsuki from yesterday being harassed by Masu. He wants to eat her flowers. I never really got Masu's deal. How does this branch of sin work? Is it in his mouth or his stomach? More importantly, how did he end up here? Was he wrongly accused like Ganta, or did he go on a bender eating children? Anyway, Ganta distracts him with food and Minatsuki leads him to her room. It's full of flowers, almost like she's trying way too hard to put up a facade of innocence. Fuck's sake. She has a little cry, shows Ganta her tits, and the two agree to escape. Ganta gets stabbed in the leg, and the two are stopped by guards. Turns out these two have been selected to fight in the next Carnival Corps. I'm rushing through this part because you already know what's coming. Turns out Minatsuki, just like her brother, was manipulating Ganta. Minatsuki's dead man name is Hummingbird, a bird often associated with joy. This is significant because I felt none during our chapters. Yeah, this is usually considered the low point of the series. Characters in Deadman Wonderland usually have one foot in the door of insanity, but I have no idea what's going on with Minatsuki, and it's really frustrating. Apparently she found out about her powers when her dad tried to do something to her. Yoh was convinced that he killed him, but later admits Minatsuki probably staged this. Don't have a go at me like I wrote this. If you're confused and angered by this situation, so am I. I have no idea what their relationship with their father was like, or if he was worth murdering. Yoh and Minatsuki especially aren't exactly reliable narrators. Minatsuki was abandoned by her mother to die during the Tokyo earthquake, which is sad and all, but she still feels like an edgy DeviantArt Teens OC from the 2000s. My favourite part is when Yoh, her brother, breaks into G Ward, tries to stop the fight, and tells her he's raised enough CP to buy off her sentence. And in response, she thanks him by using him as a meat shield so Ganta can't shoot at her. Amazing. Why did none of these guys warn Ganta about her? Especially Chaplin, who in the manga is right there providing commentary. We also get what is perhaps the second funniest exchange of dialogue in the manga. Ladies and gentlemen, Ganta Igarashi is a cuck. To be fair, we should have seen the warning signs. The anime actually does this a little better.
He took him for you. He's been busting his ass to get you out of this place, you stupid bitch! He believed in your innocence!
Please,
You really think I care if he used me to save you?
He did it all for you reads a lot better than I love being a doormat. Anyway, Senji shows up with some words of encouragement and Ganta bounces his bullets off the cage at her and wins with a headbutt. Minatsuki, like her brother, is at her best when she's being humiliated. While I'm complaining, I wanted to pause here and quickly ask, what's the general perception on Deadman Wonderland now? The anime particularly, especially the English dub, has aged like, eggs. Yeah, let's say eggs. I only ever hear from people that either really like it or have never heard of it. It seems like the series has mostly been forgotten, even if the fanbase was never huge to begin with. I can't help but think that a few people may have seen Minatsuki's episodes and dismissed the series entirely. I wouldn't blame someone if they dismissed the whole series as edgelord shit just based on this. Actually, I would argue that Minatsuki is the beginning of a downward trend in Deadman Wonderland's writing. While I'm on the topic, I'd be remiss not to bring up the opening credits. If you're a fan of Berserk and think Tell Me Why is corny, you haven't heard nothing yet.
I will be your dead man, with nothing but this blood on my hands.
I'm gonna put a pin in that now before I give myself diarrhea.
You swish in here with your lineup. As though I'm not chin deep in the dregs of your incompetence as it is, you imbecile. Wonderland isn't your personal abattoir. Merely a birdcage, one that I created myself.
Officially, the purpose of Wonderland is to raise funds towards the restoration of Tokyo. I went over its true purpose in the Tamaki section, but I bring it up because before Ganta's match with Minatsuki, we're introduced to the director, the founder of Deadman Wonderland. In the anime, Tamaki refers to him as his father, but I'm not going to go into the canon status of that statement. Believe me, if you've read the manga all the way through, you know why it's easier not to bring this up. It's a fucking mess. For the purposes of the anime, I guess it explains how Tamaki got the job. Nepotism is far from the shadiest thing going on in Wonderland. We're eventually told his name is Hagire. I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly either. I'm just gonna call him Grandpa. Grandpa is guarded at all times by these albino twins, not unlike Shiro in appearance. He appears to be a dying old man. Tamaki even says that he's aging stupid fast. Grandpa expresses frustration at how Tamaki is running his birdcage, but the two have a mutual interest in Ganta, watching all of his matches as an anonymous member of the audience. The fact that Grandpa doesn't use an avatar in the audience is interesting, almost like this is his way of further distancing himself from Tamaki. I'm calling him Grandpa because that's what Shiro calls him too. Again, not entirely true, this guy's situation is a mess. Regardless, he and Shiro have a relationship of sorts. The two have this weird sadomasochistic dynamic between each other where the two just kill each other endlessly. At this point it's not entirely clear what's going on with them or what Grandpa's deal is. Grandpa is a walking spoiler, so I'm not going to go into it. For now, just know the lullaby has stopped, Shiro's acting weird again, and she's having a dead man fight with Grandpa. Yeah, Shiro is a dead man too, but she can't always use her powers. More on that in a bit. Shiro and Grandpa cause an earthquake with their fight. As they do this, Ganta starts unlocking some pre-Tokyo earthquake memories. Turns out he's known Shiro since they were children, and used to hang out at his mum's old lab. The two would partake in the favourite childhood pastime of saving each other from angry pit bulls. But more importantly, the two were fans of this Ace Man show and would reenact the characters' moves as they beat the shit out of each other. I find Ace Man's design in the anime especially prudent. Looks familiar, doesn't he? Ganta relays all of this to Yoh, comforted by the fact that even though the Wretched Egg may have killed all of his friends at school, he still has a remnant of his old life in Shiro. As Ganta finishes reminiscing, Shiro and Grandpa finish up their battle, and it's here we reach the rotten yolk of this Wretched Egg. It's Shiro. Kinda. The Wretched Egg appears to be Shiro's altar. Deadman Wonderland keeps the Wretched Egg contained with a system of biocomputers called the Mother Goose system. Anytime Mother Goose encounters some kind of error, or has to shut down in, let's say, a power outage, Shiro goes to sleep and the Wretched Egg awakens. The reveal of Shiro as the Red Man forever changes the Ganta-Shiro dynamic. Not for the characters, yet, but for the audience, as now the closer these two get, the more uncomfortable their blossoming relationship becomes. Yoh's got the right idea here. While not tied to any species of bird specifically, the Wretched Egg also fits within Deadman naming conventions. As the originator of the nameless worm and by extension all Deadmen, the moniker of Egg is fitting. Did you like the egg bit? I'm actually way more proud of that joke than I should be. After that farce with Minatsuki is over, Senji blows Ganta's winnings on prison quality ramen. During the fight, Senji gave Ganta's branch the hilariously shit name Ganta Gun. He wants to change the name to something better, and brings up Ace Man for inspiration. Turns out Ganta and Shiro aren't the only Ace fans, he's one too. From this point on, Senji is effectively Ganta's dad. He congratulates him on the win but warns that he's gaining a reputation. Much like my mum, Senji severely underestimates the volume of his inside voice. Turns out this lady's been looking for him. After this, Ganta gets cornered by this woman. The first thing she does upon meeting the woodpecker is punch him. This is Karako, the game fowl. Game fowl is a term in cockfighting used to describe chickens bred specifically for the sport. Fitting considering that she introduces herself both to Ganta and us by challenging him to a fight. It's never shown to us, but we find out that Karako had a bit of a reputation about her as a psycho in the arena. Her branch of sin creates a hardened coating of blood around her body, usually her fists. Rather than growing weapons or shooting projectiles, Karako is already a capable fighter and her branch enhances what she already has. It probably doesn't sound like much from how I'm describing it, but this is potentially one of the most busted branches of sin in the series. Seriously, it's both acid proof and she can close potentially fatal wounds with it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. After Karako finishes beating the shit out of Ganta, she invites him to join Scarchain, a band of renegade deadmen who are sick of the bullshit of Wonderland. Finally, it seems like Ganta has found some prisoners in G Ward he can relate to. Their leader, Nagi, seems like a pretty chill guy. He has a weird voice. The manga makes a point of it being mechanical, and even draws these rigid speech bubbles to communicate this. In the anime, it just sounds like he's talking into an empty can of Coke. Nagi's dead man name is the Owl. Owls are usually portrayed as symbols of wisdom, but they've also been used to represent symbols of luck and protection from misfortune. I bring this up because it becomes ironic as we learn more about Nagi's past. Nagi's branch of sin is the Owl's Eye. He can make bombs with his blood. This is the first in a subset of branch of sin that I'm going to be calling How. Masu also counts because, as I said earlier, I have no idea what's going on with him. A character I've neglected to mention so far is Hitara, or name unknown, I guess. He shows up quickly with Chaplin and the boys. His branch of sin is just flammable blood. He just bleeds everywhere, and then you stand in it and he burns you. Trust me, it gets worse. As this is going on, Yoh is snaking around G Ward trying to get his CP back. He runs into Tamaki, who just lets him stay there. He's hanging out with this fucking wanker. Tamaki says it's Minatsuki's turn for too bad for the loser. And it's here we find out it was all for nothing. That 2 billion CP Yoh saved is wasted effort, because you can't buy off sentences in G Ward. Get fucked. Yeah, and it's also about this point that Yoh starts having some real world problems as well. He kinda just fades into the background and becomes a satellite character to Minatsuki. This is effectively the end of his arc. What a fucking sad ending for this character. Then they shoot him. Something I like about the anime is that Scarchain's hideout has a warmer colour scheme compared to the rest of the prison. Everywhere else there's this greenish-greyish tint, almost like everything is under disgusting fluorescent lights. I actually like the desaturated colours because it makes the blood stand out more. The official art of the manga goes in the opposite direction, just bright garish colours all around, especially on the dead men. I like both of these interpretations. The anime feels cold and industrial, and the manga feels like a circus. Anyway, Nagi earns Ganta's trust by fucking up the too bad for the loser slot machine. The only thing Minatsuki will be losing is her hair. Not sure why Senji didn't get the same privilege. Actually, most of the dead men we've been told have had to go through penalty rounds have only lost internal organs. Maybe I'm just a sick fuck, but I would have liked to see a few more dead men walking around with entire limbs missing. Or at least some more scarring. It probably would have helped to make Wonderland look more like the horrible place it is. Just a minor gripe. This guy's missing a leg, I guess. Unfortunately, this guy we saw with Tamaki earlier has made his way to the hideout. He's also brought Yoh with him. His name is Genkaku, and he's here to play some banging tunes with his guitar gun. Ganta shoots him with his Ganta gun, but it does nothing. Then Shiro falls out of a vent and smashes his guitar, making him cry like a bitch.
Ultra Chaos Endorphin Screw Hadouken Style Alpha Version Kick!
Bitch!
Finally, our heroes are reunited. Yoh decides not to stay. Another quick pause, but I like this spread on Volume 4. Especially Nagi, who looks like he's about to run off panel and throw up. Not long after, all of Scarchain is here. Despite having a big operation coming up, everyone seems pretty chilled out. Ganta thinks it's a little weird. Nagi tells him that freedom shouldn't be something grim. Nagi has this softness to him that seems to rub off on everyone he meets. It's kinda sweet. Everyone we've met so far has either been two-faced or just fucking sick. This is really the first time things have felt comfortable. We're also introduced to this smug emo kid named Rokuro. He's an intel gathering nerd and he doesn't like Ganta, almost like he's a fan of the series. He also has this weird neck that I can only assume is full of bubble wrap and glow sticks. He doesn't care for this dumb new kid. The only thing Rokuro cares about is his calculations. Rokuro is the obvious twist villain of this arc. I'm spoiling it now. Deadman Wonderland can be kind of hit and miss with its character was evil all along twists. You can probably tell from the way I rushed through Minatsuki's chapters. The obvious standouts would be Wretched Egg, whose early reveal creates an ominous tension for the rest of the series, and another which I won't get to until part 2. Speaking of Wretched Egg, the bartender man deducts that Shiro isn't a dead man. Little does he know. When he asks where she's from, she says she's been here longer than anyone else. Of course, at this stage we already know this, and why. Just a reminder that this relationship could turn ugly at any second. As this is going on, Tamaki is using Grandpa's head as a bowling ball to celebrate taking its job. Remember, in the anime this is meant to be his father. In the manga there's no way this can possibly be true, but in the anime that just makes the scene funnier. The twins are pretty pissed, but they won't have to put up with this for very long. Scarchain's plan is to get this data chip out to the public. Deadman Wonderland has to pass these yearly government safety inspections, which must be a fucking nightmare for the staff. Such a nightmare, in fact, that Tamaki will most likely be too busy trying to pass if he wants to keep his job. During the week of inspections, none of the attractions will be running, including Carnival Corpse. Fortunately for Scarchain, one of the inspectors is a rat. All they have to do is break out of the facility and give the inspector this USB stick, which contains what I can only assume is terabytes worth of Deadman snuff. I'm not sure how they got the inspector's attention. Did Nagi or Karako poke their heads out of a gutter Pennywise style during the last one and say, "Hey, heard of Carnival Corpse?" The main obstacle standing between Scarchain and freedom is the Undertakers, Wonderland's worst prisoners turned anti-deadmen, of which Genkaku is one of them. Ganta tells the class that when Genkaku attacked them earlier, his Ganta gun didn't work. The Undertaker's weapons all use Worm Eater, a technology which oxidizes Branch of Sin, rendering it useless. This is all true and we know it, but Rokuro has supposedly hacked into the cameras and has footage of Genkaku slightly moving his head out of the way. After Rokuro thoroughly debunks Ganta with a reliable source, himself, Ganta tells everyone that they all have shit for brains, their rebellion sucks and they can go fuck off. This is unfortunately when Ganta starts showing some, let's say, personality flaws. There's an open secret within the fanbase that Ganta is kind of hard to love, and I feel the Scarchain arc is where this downward spiral begins. I can forgive his angst earlier in the series because he's clearly just some poor kid in distress, but now he's lashing out against people who just want the best for him, even if Rokuro just embarrassed him in front of everyone. I've heard some people excuse it as this is how a teenager would act, but I feel that only carries him through the first few arcs, not this one. Thankfully, Ganta quickly shows remorse for this episode, but his disdain for those who would dare show him love only gets worse from here. Ganta returns to his cell and sees Nagi playing with Shiro, and the two work things out. They talk about what escaping Wonderland means to them. We learn from Senji that Nagi and his wife were both dead men. They were forced to fight in Carnival Corps during her pregnancy. Nagi threw the match and lost his vocal cords, and too bad for the loser. Tamaki, not happy with this insubordination, had Genkaku kill his wife during an escape attempt. As she was dying, Nagi couldn't even cry out her name. That's pretty rough. Despite this, the goal of Nagi's scar chain isn't to settle any grudges, but rather the mass liberation of dead men and for the public to know the truth. He's a lot of people's favourite character, and I can see why. Nagi's just a fucking sweetheart, despite everything he's been put through. He keeps on smiling and tries to bring out the best in people. This outlook is almost too good to be true. Later that night, Ganta is lying awake fantasizing about killing the Red Man. He wakes up Shiro in his anger, but remembers what Nagi told him. While she's awake, Ganta asks Shiro what she wants out of life if she could do anything. All Shiro wants to do is stuff her face. That, and she wants the Ferris Wheel outside. She doesn't even know it's a ride, but Ganta promises to take her on it when they escape. This is the cutest shit ever. I love seeing these two be happy. On rereads, it breaks my fucking heart. I wish we got to see more of Ganta and Shiro like this. Even if we know that Shiro is Wretched Egg, their blossoming relationship is just fucking adorable. A character who I'm very late to bring up is Makina. As the chief warden of Deadman Wonderland, she doesn't tolerate any bullshit. The first thing she does when we see her is nonchalantly answering a new prisoner's question about her bra size. She's a G. Hey, wait a minute. Followed by punishing Yoh for stealing. As the series progresses, she becomes increasingly impatient with Tamaki and suspicious of Ganta. After reviewing security footage of Ganta's branch of sin, she sends the security droid Necromacro to apprehend or kill him. When it enters G Ward, she loses contact. Outraged that Tamaki has kept an entire block of the prison secret from her, this anger leads to her and her assistant breaking into his office to steal his data and find out just what he's been hiding. I don't really have much to say about her assistant. Her entire character is she wants to fuck her boss. It probably would have been easier for Scarchain to get her attention, could have just cut out the inspection entirely, but oh well. As the inspection begins, both Makina and Scarchain put their plans into action. Shiro is not invited. Karako justifies it as Ganta trying to protect her. I'm not sure if there was any plan to go back for Shiro. Nagi and Rokuro take the control center as the rest of the gang led by Karako take the chip outside. Things go smoothly at first until they trip up security and another Necromacro appears and starts spewing acid onto the dead men. Karako stays behind to fight so her friends can get to the elevator. She throws the chip to Ganta and holds up the platform long enough for them to escape. Back in the control room, Nagi and Rokuro meet this creepy child, Hibana. Turns out she's an Undertaker and this is a trap set by Rokuro. The obvious twist villain is revealed. Not only that, but Nagi finds out that Ganta was right about the Undertaker's weapons. Rokuro used his YouTube poop skills to manipulate the footage. Shit. Not only that, but the data chip is a bomb. Oh fuck. Hibana was punished harshly as a child, and delights in meeting bad behavior with the ultimate punishment, murder. She's also a seasoned torturer and cannibal, apparently. Hibana believes that this intense punishment made her more mature and refers to herself as a lady. Nagi is quick to point out that only stupid kids think like this, which sends Hibana over the edge. Also, Nagi seems to be fond of analogies relating to weather, particularly rain. He describes Ganta's luck so far as a blue sky with a chance of thunderstorms, but more importantly, he tells this child that he's going to turn her into a rain of blood. This is a very strange thing for someone as soft as Nagi to say. This is our first hint at a hidden dark side of his character. Hibana fucks up Nagi pretty bad, but he gives them both a smack and brings down the elevator. He calls an empty headquarters to warn anyone who's listening about the bomb. Fortunately, Shiro just so happened to be passing by and rushes off to save them. In the anime, Shiro is a little bit late, and instead it's heard by... on the elevator, the gang talk amongst themselves and share a good laugh as Karako is presumably dying downstairs. Fortunately, the Undertakers are here to knock some sense into them.
Yo, fucking guys!
Scarchain members die left and right as they realise they've fallen into a trap. The bartender from earlier slaps Ganta and tells him to protect the chip, which he already had. I'm not sure why he does this. I guess he just felt like slapping Ganta. Who can blame him? I'm gonna assume he had a vision of the future. Before he can finish beating him senseless, he's killed by Undertakers. Things are looking grim until the Undertakers pull a surprise retreat. We know it's because they don't want to get blown up, but the Deadmen are a little confused. I'm not sure why they even had to be here. They could have just sealed off this area and left Scarchain to die with the bomb. Actually, that's another issue I have with the arc. The Undertakers are just playing defense. I get that their purpose is to stop Deadmen getting too rowdy or trying to escape, but it just makes them feel like security rather than true villains. You'd think they'd just be standing outside of Scarchain's headquarters at all times. Anyway, Shiro bursts in and throws the chip bomb into a fire. Despite everyone seeing the explosion, everyone gets really pissed off with Shiro, assuming she was either tricked or is in league with the Undertakers. This scene is really frustrating. All Shiro has to do here is tell them that it was a bomb. Actually, she doesn't even have to go that far. They all saw the explosion. I'm just gonna assume that after the Undertakers left, they started filling this room with carbon monoxide to make them stupider. Ganta and Shiro have a fight and she calls him weak. This awakens bitch Ganta, who punches Shiro and tells her he never wants to see her again. This is a pathetic attempt to create conflict where none exists, and it's the worst scene in the arc. Worse still, they linger on this plot point and it ends up poisoning the rest of the arc as well. I'm not against driving a wedge between Ganta and Shiro halfway through the arc to create conflict. The issue is how. Everyone goes back to headquarters and Shiro goes back to Grandpa's to eat her feelings. This final page fills me with a great sadness. By the way, the Karako scene from earlier is played off as a sacrifice. I wanted to point this out because in the manga she's just inexplicably back at headquarters. In the anime we actually see her return. I thought that was funny. The rest of the survivors are all moping, but Karako is ready to try this again. She questions why Shiro would do such a thing as Ganta has a little cry. I love Karako's face in this panel because we're both thinking the same thing. The anime misses an opportunity to taunt us with the characters it cut out, and Rokuro's back. He's pretty pissed off that someone figured out the chip is a bomb. Ganta starts to feel kinda bad, and Rokuro just starts freaking the fuck out. This is why I'm more forgiving of the Rokuro twist than the Minatsuki twist. Rokuro's just funny. Don't fuck with the human calculator, indeed. There's also this weird panel where he looks like he's turning into a frog. Also, cast your mind back to the anime version of the trial. Remember the fake confession? Turns out Rokuro was behind that as well. Rokuro summons his Undertaker backup, including the Heavy and the Green Goblin, only for them to be killed instantly by Senji, who's sick of Ganta hogging all the fun. He also gets really upset when he realizes he killed the strongest Undertakers first. He tries to fight the rest too, but Worm Eater negates his Crow Claw. Fortunately, he has a trick up his sleeve. Worm Eater is just pressurized air. If a dead man manages to break the sound barrier with his Branch of Sin, it can break that too. He calls this variation of his Crow Claw Invisible Black because he hogs all the good names for himself. I'm convinced that with a Branch of Sin like his, a faster than sound attack would either tear his body apart or just spray everywhere and he'd die from the blood loss. I'm not exactly sure how he performs Invisible Black, but it looks cool as shit, so I'll let it slide. Also, I would have loved to see him use Invisible Black and Carnival Corpse and kill Ganta instantly. I guess it explains how he did this. Meanwhile, Genkaku is having a little talk with Nagi, who was captured by the Undertakers. By the way, we all know one reason from the OP, but did you know Fate actually recorded another song for the anime? It's called From the Heart and it's only slightly better. Genkaku plays Bo for his new boyfriend. I've already gone over a bit of Nagi's backstory, but it seems Genkaku knows a bit more. After the death of his wife, Nagi went on a rampage mass murdering Undertakers as Genkaku watched from a locker. Apparently this made him extremely horny. It's unclear if this memory is repressed or if Genkaku's just making it up. Nagi is being drugged as he says all this after all. Either way, he's successfully gotten into his head. With headquarters clear of Undertakers, Ganta finally has time to think about what he's done. With Nagi gone and many other members dead, Karako invites Senji to join Scarchain. He declines. Unlike them, Senji has no desire to leave Wonderland. Again, G Ward is the only place that will let him spread his wings. There's too much bullshit outside. In Wonderland, only the strongest survive. Before he leaves, he looks at Ganta and tells him that the weak shouldn't bare their fangs. Back at Grandpa's, Shiro is still pretty upset. Her sulking is interrupted by... After Senji tells Scarchain to get fucked, Ganta follows him back to his cell and begs him to train him. This is where things, especially in the anime, start to get really messy. Also, I'm pretty sure this episode was animated by a different team, because this is a completely different art style compared to what we're used to. The rendering is very minimal, which allows more time to be spent on fluid movement. I actually like this a lot. Looks like Naruto. If I can find who did it, I'll put their name up on screen. Anyway, Senji doesn't want to train a crybaby, so Ganta cries more and he changes his mind. In the manga, Ganta is popping in and out of Senji's gym, stopping his training briefly to attend another Scarchain meeting. In the anime, they have it without him. Karako purposely gave him the wrong time. I ask again, was there a plan to go back for the others? It seems like Karako was fully intent on just letting Ganta rot in... you know what, never mind. Fuck you, Ganta. Rokuro was tied up and beaten into giving up a safe route, but he admits that even these aren't perfect. Karako and Scarchain leave, and... that's the last we ever see of Rokuro. They seriously just leave him there to die when his candy timer runs out. We never see him again. Rest in peace, Rokuro. You were too funny. Oh yeah, remember the candy? It's been a while since I brought it up. I hope Ganta's been eating his. Before Karako goes off to save Nagi, I wanted to bring up their relationship. In the early days of Scarchain, Karako was specifically recruited by Nagi, despite her reputation. Again, we're never actually shown what Karako was like before this point, so just take their word for it. Nagi admired her skills in Carnival Corpse and especially takes a liking to her shitty, cheap bell necklace. He says the noise is a reminder that a friend is nearby. This line is so corny it ends up winning Karako over. A bit later on, Nagi is showing Karako a locket, supposedly containing a picture of his daughter. He says it's a gift from his wife outside. Right now, you're probably thinking, wait, didn't Nagi's wife die trying to escape? And you'd be correct. Nagi is living in a fantasy world. His kind-hearted optimism is the result of delusion. When we see Karako's point of view, the locket is empty. There's nothing for him outside. Despite this, Karako still cares a lot for Nagi, to the point where she wants to start a new life with him after they escape Wonderland. Despite being incredibly fucked in the head, Karako still loved him and was ready to die for his cause. Aww. Back at the gym, Senji is growing frustrated with Ganta's lack of progress. Fortunately, he's got a plan. He stomps on Ganta's candy and suspends the last one on a string. If Ganta can't shoot faster than Invisible Black, he dies. But Ganta is wasting a lot of blood, so if they're not careful, he might die anyway. Remember this. The two continue training, and it's here that we perhaps get the strangest change to the anime. A new scene is added. Senji and Ganta's training is suddenly interrupted by If you've read the manga in its entirety, you know why I've been hesitating to talk about this character. Toto, aka Mockingbird, was once the strongest dead man in Wonderland before he disappeared mysteriously. So far he's only been brought up secondhand, but the way characters react to the mere mention of his name reinforces his mystique. Toto is extremely difficult to talk about in the context of the anime because of his relationship to another character who I'll talk about in part 2, but for now I'm going to have to word this carefully and play dumb to the future events of the series. Mockingbirds are known for their ability to imitate sounds, from the calls of other birds to man-made sounds like horns and sirens. As such, they're often portrayed as symbols of mischief, which we do see here, as well as in some flashbacks later on, but I find a much more appropriate interpretation is mockingbirds as deceivers. Toto already seems to know Shiro and Ganta well, despite supposedly never having met each other. He talks down about Ganta to Shiro as he eats Grandpa's old chocolates. She continues to work Shiro up until she runs off to get back at him. Turns out Grandpa's chocolates were alcoholic and Shiro is wasted. In the anime, he interrupts Ganta's training, scaring the shit out of both him and Senji, who points out Toto's not acting like himself. Toto hops and skips around Senji's gym, almost like he's been going from hospital bed to wheelchair and is just now able to walk again. He licks the blood from Senji's crow claw wound and tries to get some from Ganta as well before he stops him. This scene is based on a similar exchange in chapter 24, even though the anime only adapts the first 21. The way the anime handles Toto's abilities is a little vague and confusing, probably intentionally so, but I'm just going to explain it here. As his namesake implies, Mockingbird's branch of sin allows him to copy others by tasting their blood. With this in mind, it makes sense how he would eventually become known as the strongest dead man, as every opponent he defeats in Carnival Corps gets added to his arsenal. I'll talk more about Toto in part 2, but for now he's not that important, only showing up briefly to introduce himself. Instead of the Mockingbird scene, in the manga, Ganta and Senji run into Minatsuki and Yoh during a break. Senji, being a prude, freaks out at the amount of leg Minatsuki is showing. Minatsuki shows Senji her pussy, killing him instantly. Yoh explains sonic booms to the reader because I'm not sure why he does this. Surely anyone old enough to actually read Deadman Wonderland would know what a sonic boom is. Minatsuki tells Ganta to think of blood like water and squirts her juice on him. Thanks. As this is going on, Karako is infiltrating the Undertakers' base disguised in a stolen uniform, but a drunk Shiro who got lost looking for Ganta blows her cover. Shit. When Ganta goes back to his training, he finds out he can fire faster shots when he's anemic, a skill he learned just in time for Genkaku to taunt Scarchain with his new hostages. Everyone takes the bait as they charge in to save their friends, including Ganta, who is running into the final battle with anemia. The dead men arrive with stolen weapons at the Undertaker's base. Even Hibana, who we last saw being exploded by Nagi, is here. The battle begins and Ganta uses his new trick on the Undertakers. Remember, this is the last of his blood that he's firing. They get to where Nagi's being held, and it's here we see what's become of him. Now forced to come to terms with the death of his daughter and his brain fried by drugs, Undertaker and Deadman alike are horrified at what he's become as he starts murdering indiscriminately, much to the joy of our metal monk. Genkaku was a Buddhist monk before the quake. Despite being a victim of abuse of all kinds from his peers, he was encouraged to remain passive and turn the other cheek. Genkaku felt no ill will towards his abusers, only pity. Eventually, he noticed a hole in his philosophy. How could Buddha know that death was a burden if he had never experienced it? After the quake, upon seeing his abusers in pain, Genkaku seemed to have found the answer. Whether from some grand epiphany epiphany or years of repressed emotions bubbling up to the surface, Genkaku came to see death as the ultimate salvation. To live is to suffer, especially after the quake. Therefore, killing is the ultimate act of mercy. This twisted philosophy is reflected by the shrine in his quarters, decorated with the corpses of dead men who tried to escape, including Scarchain's fallen. Genkaku sees killing as an act of kindness. He's corrupted Nagi, who now believes there are no lives worth saving, turning him into his weapon. Ganta is shocked to see the man who taught him the value of optimism and kindness reduced to this. He asks why, and Karako admits to Ganta, and perhaps to herself, that Nagi was weak. His fantasy of his daughter was the only thing keeping him going. Without it, there is only darkness. Nagi is about to execute an injured Shiro before Ganta gets in the way. Both Nagi and Shiro yell at Ganta to stop being an idiot, but he takes the beating. I already complained about the Shiro punching scene earlier, but it's actually pretty heartwarming to see Ganta protect Shiro after the shit he put her through. I just wish we got to this point more naturally, instead of forcing a fake conflict between Ganta and Shiro to have them come back together at the end. I can't help but wish Nagi would hit him a little bit harder. Ganta reminds Nagi that he was the one who told him about not living for revenge, but he's not listening. Ganta and Nagi have a lot in common. Both have lost people they care about and found new connections in Wonderland. Here, Ganta is staring down what he could have become if he dedicated his life to revenge. Despite Ganta's best efforts, he can barely break through to Nagi. He keeps trying to deny what's right in front of him until he's saved by the bell? In the end, it's Karako that pulls him through. I would complain that this ending is just cheesy power of friendship shit, but these two are too adorable. I'm sorry. I just love these characters a lot. Suddenly, Ganta collapses. At first he assumes it's the anemia that he had been suffering from since his training, but quickly realizes he's being poisoned. Looks like someone forgot to eat his candy. This brings me to the main problem I have with this final battle of the arc. The fact Ganta could even fight up until this point is stretching believability, but this is the moment where it snaps completely. Ganta should have straight up just died here. He ran into the battle anemic, still flinging his blood everywhere, while the little blood he has was being poisoned. I do like that this sequence relies on the audience forgetting about the candy mechanic too, but they obviously wrote themselves into a corner here. Anyway, Genkaku is very disappointed that Nagi would turn back so easily and stabs Karako in the tit. Beautiful use of the page turn, by the way. Ganta shoots Genkaku with his Supersonic Ganta gun. It breaks through his worm eater and it barely scratches him. Looks like he blew it. I'm not sure why this doesn't work. In the translation I've been using, Ganta assumes that Genkaku is immune to his branch of sin, but it could also be because Ganta is basically running on empty at the moment. It's never elaborated upon. Maybe Genkaku just lathers himself with worm eater skin cream every morning. Karako closes the wound with some straight up bullshit as Nagi tells Genkaku he's out. And he is fuming. Genkaku goes apeshit, turns Nagi into a cheezel and starts murdering everyone in sight. Even Hibana thinks it's a bit much. Genkaku turns his guitar gun towards a dying Ganta and offers to end his suffering, who tells him to lick his nuts, and wipes his ass with Genkaku's 12-year-old philosophy. Better to keep searching for the light than to die miserably in darkness. Ganta fires one last shot, but this isn't the Ganta gun we're used to. We've seen the red diamond in Ganta's chest glow a few times during significant moments of distress, but now his skin is covered in glowing red markings as he fires what I assume is the last of his blood at Genkaku. The projectile is far larger and more solid compared to the wet blobs we've grown accustomed to. Unlike the other dead men, Ganta's branch is still evolving. Fortunately, no one that would want to take it for themselves is watching. Worm Eater has no effect, and Genkaku almost starts to panic before Nagi holds him in place. making sure it connects. In a weird way, this gesture almost seems to comfort Genkaku in his last moments. Finally, Nagi is returning the strange form of love that Genkaku showed him. As the bolt connects, Genkaku smiles, grateful that it's his turn to be saved. When the smoke clears, a dying Nagi gives Ganta his candy. Don't ask me how he's still alive. Nagi comments that the rain is warm and will make a beautiful rainbow. By rain, he means Karako's tears. Nagi dies, enjoying the fresh air. The last surviving members of Scar Chain mourn their leader's passing, none more so than Karako. As much as I've whinged about the series so far, this arc especially, this bittersweet ending still gets me to this day. Wonderland's greatest strength, in my opinion, is its side characters. They're all likeable in their own strange ways, in spite of their many flaws. Except, you know. I love Nagi and Karako, and the last we see of them in the anime is one heart broken over the other's death. It's a somber note to end their story on, only made more depressing by how little of Scar Chain actually makes it out. Compare how crowded and alive Headquarters was at the beginning of the arc to the fray on the boat. As sad as it is to see, it just makes this outcome feel all the more earned. Ganta and Shiro stay behind, and the inspector goes home with the data chip, which blows up the bus. Nah, just kidding. Despite the awful price, the mission was a success. Less successful, however, is Makina, her own investigation only turning up a list of candidates. But for what, you may ask? Well, during the inspection, we find out Tamaki has some powerful friends in the government. Throughout the series, we see him discussing the possibility of creating artificial dead men. During the inspections, he negotiates funding with officials. Despite the budget being tight, he succeeds. Makina is crushing her assistant under her boobs as she hears all this, by the way. But now, with so many dead men missing or dead and the failure of the Undertakers, it's time to put this plan into action. By the way, one of the candidates is Azami. Hibana, who fled the battle when Genkaku started losing it, runs into Todo. She tries to attack, but is killed by Mockingbird. In the anime, he uses Invisible Black, which he stole from Senji earlier. It's not clear how he killed Hibana in the manga. It happens off-panel, so I'm just gonna assume that he beats her to death. Regardless, it seems he exerted a little too much effort. The stitching on his wrist comes loose, as he comments that his body is still too fragile. Back in the wreckage, Shiro and Ganta reconcile, and look up at the Ferris Wheel, reminding them of their promise. Ganta starts to cry again, but swears it's just the candy. I'll let him have this one. After all, it's been a rough night. Finally, in Grandpa's seemingly abandoned quarters, Todo muses over taking Ganta's branch of sin. And that's it. That's everything. That's all of the adapted material covered. Well, not entirely. The anime adds another new scene. Ganta and Shiro sit on a rooftop as Shiro sings the Woodpecker song. This unsettles Ganta, who tells her to stop. A reasonable request, as the last time he heard it was right before his friends died. He comments that it's weird that the Red Man would also know the same song. I don't like this scene. I'm not sure how Ganta and Shiro made it out of G Ward in broad daylight, unless this is a reference to the next arc. But my main issue is Ganta is so close to connecting the dots here. I assume right after this, Ganta just fucking shot Shiro in the head. Whatever, it's fine. There's still so much left up in the air. Tamaki is about to get started on his artificial dead man project, and the Red Man is still at large. And just what does Todo want Ganta's branch of sin for? Surely we'll see all these loose ends tied up when Season 2 comes around. Right? Just as movies have to balance out budget losses with box office revenue, anime studios do the same with the sale of physical media, including DVDs and Blu-rays. And Deadman Wonderland flopped hard. During this time, Manglobe continued to accumulate debt, which peaked at 350 million yen in 2015. Wonderland finished production in 2011, 4 years earlier, but I can't imagine it helped. After years of hemorrhaging money, Manglobe finally filed for bankruptcy, taking any hope for a series revival down with it. There would never be a season 2. By this time, the series had cemented its legacy as an underrated cult classic in the West, accumulating ratings on Toonami thanks to good word of mouth, but ultimately not enough. It now survives as an unfinished adaptation gathering dust on streaming services, still fondly remembered by a small group of dedicated fans. I both watched the anime and read the manga in its entirety in preparation for this video. Manga fans swear up and down that the anime is an inferior product, but after revisiting it for this video, what do I think? I mean, it's fine. It's fine. Yes, there are a lot of unnecessary changes, but only a select few are especially distracting. Yes, it cut a lot of characters, but they aren't super important to the narrative. Yes, a lot of the more graphic scenes were censored, but that's kinda the price you pay for getting on TV. Even the soundtrack is alright. It suits the tone fine enough, but I can't think of many standouts. It's fine, it fits right in with most anime of this era. Underrated as it may be, this was never going to set the world on fire. That, and it's not hard to call it underrated with sales like, this. I can see how this may have disappointed some people. I prefer the manga myself, but it's not a terrible adaptation by any stretch. In fact, I actually think it did a few things better than the manga. If the show did get a season 2, it wouldn't be too hard to reintroduce the cut characters, except Azami. I feel she needs the context the early chapters provide for her arc with Ganta to work. Still, it's not that bad. It's an okay adaptation of a pretty average and very messy series. As the kids would say, Deadman Wonderland is mid. And yet, I'm absolutely fucking obsessed with this series. As I said in the beginning, I discovered Deadman Wonderland in my teen years, and it's only grown on me since. The older I get, and the more I pick this series apart, the more I appreciate it. Even now, I'm yet to find another series quite like it, except maybe Elfen Lied. From what I've read, I don't doubt that Deadman Wonderland was at least inspired by Elfen Lied, but I'll hold off on accusations or denial until I've seen or read it. There, I brought up Elfen Lied, I hope you're happy. That being said, Wonderland has been hugely influential on my art as well. If you look hard enough at my work, you'll find these two fingerprints all over it. So, please don't. So yeah. That's the first 21 chapters of Deadman Wonderland, a flawed and messy series that I love, warts and all. If you take one thing from my insane ramblings, let it be this. Your favourite show sucks and you should feel bad.